Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time, way back, to the sun-baked banks of the Nile, to a world where time wasn't neatly compartmentalized into 60-second minutes or 24-hour days. Imagine, if you will, the scorching heat of the Egyptian sun beating down on your brow, the dry, dusty air catching in your throat as you squint against the glare. You're standing amidst towering sandstone temples, their hieroglyphs whispering ancient secrets, the distant, rhythmic creak of a shaduf lifting water from the life-giving river. You glance up at the sky, a vast, unbroken blue, and you realize something profound. There are no clocks here, no digital displays, no ticking hands. Time, here, feels less like a rigid measurement and more like the slow, deliberate crawl of the sun across the heavens, or the imperceptible ebb and flow of the great river itself. You probably won't survive a day here without a decent SPF, let alone keep track of your appointments. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin our slumbering adventure in a world where the concept of time, as we understand it, was still very much a fledgling idea. For early humans, time was largely dictated by the sun and the moon. Day and night, the waxing and waning of the lunar cycle, the rhythm of the seasons, these were the grand, undeniable markers. But as societies grew more complex, as agriculture demanded precise planting and harvesting schedules, and as religious rituals required specific timings, humanity began to crave a more granular way to track the passage of hours, or at least portions of the day. Enter ancient Egypt, a civilization renowned for its monumental architecture, its complex belief systems, and, as we'll gently discover tonight, its surprisingly sophisticated approach to timekeeping. You might picture grand pharaohs, mummies, and pyramids, and you'd be right. But beneath that grand facade lay a society deeply attuned to the nuances of cosmic order, and that included the orderly progression of time. Initially, like most ancient cultures, the Egyptians relied heavily on sundials. You can imagine them, crude stone pillars or etched markings on a flat surface, casting a shadow that crept slowly throughout the daylight hours. You'd watch that shadow, following its languid journey, and based on its position, you'd have a rough idea of the time. It was practical, straightforward, and entirely dependent on a clear, sunny sky. But what happens when the sun dips below the horizon? What happens on cloudy days? A rarity in Egypt, but not an impossibility. What about the long dark nights when priests needed to perform rituals at specific, astronomically determined moments? This, my sleepy friend, was the pressing dilemma. The sundial, for all its simplicity and elegance during the day, was utterly useless after dusk. And for a civilization so deeply intertwined with celestial observation and nocturnal religious ceremonies, this was a significant handicap. Imagine trying to coordinate the complex logistics of temple life, the changing of guards, the preparation of offerings, or the precise moment for an astrological reading, all in the dead of night, without a reliable way to measure time. It would be chaos, or at least politely delayed chaos. So, the ingenious minds of ancient Egypt, ever practical and deeply spiritual, began to ponder alternatives. They looked to the natural world around them, to the very elements that sustained their lives. And what element was more fundamental, more omnipresent than water? The Nile, after all, was the very artery of their civilization, its annual inundation bringing life and fertility. It was only natural that water, in some form, would become their next great time-telling tool. This is where the story of the Clepsydra begins. Don't worry, it's not as scary as it sounds. In fact, the word itself is quite gentle, derived from Greek words meaning to steal water. And that's precisely what these devices did. They stole water, drop by precious drop, to measure the stealthy march of time. You see, The fundamental principle is disarmingly simple. So simple, it almost makes you wonder why it took so long for someone to think of it. If water flows out of a container at a steady, measurable rate, then the amount of water that has flowed out, or the amount that has collected in another container, can tell you how much time has passed. It's like a leaky bucket, but on purpose. Now, when we talk about ancient Egyptian water clocks, don't picture anything resembling the intricate gears and springs of later European clocks. These were far more organic, far more attuned to the flow of nature. The earliest forms were likely nothing more than simple pottery bowls, perhaps with a small hole near the bottom. You'd fill the bowl with water, and then slowly, steadily, the water would begin to drip out. The challenge, of course, was consistency. How do you ensure the water drips out at the same rate, day after day, hour after hour? This was the first hurdle, a hurdle that required a surprising degree of early engineering prowess. You see, the rate at which water flows out of a hole is affected by the pressure of the water above it. As the water level in the bowl decreases, the pressure lessens and the flow slows down. This means that the first hour measured by a simple leaky bowl would be shorter than the last hour. Not very practical if you're trying to coordinate a precise religious ceremony or perhaps just figure out when to feed your sacred cat. Historians still argue whether the earliest, most rudimentary bowls were even intended for precise, equal divisions of time, or if they were merely for general estimation of morning, midday, and afternoon. But regardless of their initial precision, they laid the groundwork for something far more accurate. The Egyptians, being the meticulous record keepers and observers that they were, quickly realized this inherent flaw. They weren't content with just a rough estimate. They needed something more reliable, especially for those all-important night hours when the sun offered no guidance. This pursuit of precision, of bringing order to the seemingly chaotic flow of time, is a fascinating aspect of their civilization. It speaks to a deep-seated desire to understand, control, and integrate natural phenomena into their structured world. You might imagine a priest standing vigil in a dimly lit temple, perhaps late at night, watching the stars wheel across the inky sky and then turning his gaze to a simple dripping bowl. The concept of time, for him, was intrinsically linked to the movements of celestial bodies, to the cycles of the Nile, and to the eternal rhythms of their gods. And the water clock, in its humble way, became a terrestrial echo of these grand, cosmic processes. It was a small, contained universe, mimicking the larger one, ticking away, or rather, dripping away, the moments of their lives. So, while we often marvel at their monumental achievements, the pyramids that defy logic, the mummification processes that baffle modern science, let's not overlook the quiet genius of their everyday innovations. The water clock, in its elegant simplicity, was a testament to their observational skills, their burgeoning understanding of hydraulics, and their unwavering commitment to ordering their world, one drop at a time. And as we continue our journey, you'll see just how refined and ingenious these leaky buckets truly became. As you gently drift deeper into this historical reverie, imagine the early Egyptian engineers, not with blueprints and CAD software, but with keen eyes and a deep intuitive understanding of the world around them. They've recognized the sundials' Achilles' heel, its utter dependence on the sun. This limitation, especially for nocturnal observations crucial to their astronomy and religious practices, spurred them onward. You see, the priests, the astronomers, the royal household, everyone needed a reliable way to mark time when the celestial spotlight had packed up for the night. You can picture them, perhaps a high priest, frustrated after missing the precise astrological alignment for an important ritual, muttering something about the sun being terribly unreliable after sunset. So, they turned their attention to other, natural phenomena. And water, as we've discussed, was the most abundant and consistent force they knew. The earliest attempts at a water clock, or Clepsydra, were, as you might guess, rather basic. Think of a simple, unadorned pottery bowl with a hole at the bottom. You fill it with water and drip, 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 the water begins its slow escape. The idea, conceptually, is brilliant in its simplicity. It's like a perpetually running tap, but instead of washing your hands, it's washing away the seconds, minutes, and hours. However, as you might recall from our earlier meandering, this basic design had a glaring flaw. The rate of flow isn't constant. When the bowl is full, the pressure of the water pushes it out faster. As the water level drops, that pressure decreases and the flow slows down. This means that the time increments marked by the water level would be unequal. The first hour of water flowing out would represent a shorter period of actual time than the last hour as the flow dwindled to a trickle. It would be like trying to run a race where the first lap is 100 meters, but the last lap inexplicably stretches to 500 meters. Not exactly fair, and certainly not accurate for serious timekeeping. This inconsistency was a real headache. Imagine trying to schedule anything important. Meet me when the bowl is half empty, someone might say. But which half? The fast-draining top half or the slow-draining bottom half? It would lead to endless confusion, probably more frustrating, than trying to assemble flat-pack furniture with missing instructions. So, the Egyptians, ever the pragmatists, knew they needed to refine this charming but flawed invention. Their first improvements were likely iterative, born from countless observations and experiments. They probably tried different sizes of holes, different shapes of bowls, and different materials. This wasn't a sudden eureka moment, but a gradual process of trial and error, much like any scientific discovery. They observed that if the container was wider at the top and narrower at the bottom, it might compensate for the decreasing pressure. This wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step in the right direction, a subtle tweak to manipulate the physics of water flow. One of the most significant early innovations was the concept of the outflow clepsydra. Instead of measuring the time by the emptying of a single vessel, they started to use a vessel from which water slowly drained into a second, receiving vessel. The marks indicating the passage of time were then placed on the inside of the receiving vessel, corresponding to the accumulated volume of water. This allowed for more flexibility in design and potentially more accuracy. Think about it. If you're marking the level on the draining pot, the marks would need to be unevenly spaced to account for the slowing flow. But if you're measuring the amount collected in a second pot, you could design the outflow pot to have a specific shape that ensures a more constant drip into the collection pot. It was a clever workaround, a bit like redirecting a wonky garden hose to fill a perfectly shaped bucket. These early water clocks were often simple, conical vessels, broader at the top and tapering towards the base, with a small spigot or hole near the bottom. The inside of these vessels would be marked with lines or scales, indicating the passage of time. These lines weren't always evenly spaced, precisely because they had to account for the decreasing water pressure. So, a mark indicating the first hour from the top might be further apart from the next mark than the marks closer to the bottom. It was a manual calibration based on empirical observation, not on a precise mathematical formula that wouldn't be fully developed for centuries. Now you might wonder, how did they calibrate these things? How did they know where to put the marks? This is where their deep knowledge of astronomy came into play. They would use the rising and setting of specific stars, or the sun's position at midday, as their benchmarks. They would fill the water clock at sunrise, let it drain, and at a known celestial event, they would mark the water level. This process would be repeated over and over, perhaps for different times of the year, until they had a reliable set of markings. It was a laborious process, requiring patience and meticulous attention to detail, much like trying to get a perfectly even tan without any streaky bits. The earliest surviving evidence of an Egyptian water clock dates back to around the 16th century BCE, specifically from the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep I. This makes the water clock one of the oldest known time-measuring instruments, predating many other mechanical contrivances by centuries. Imagine sitting by the Nile almost 4 millennia ago, watching the water slowly trickle, knowing that each drop was marking the passage of time, just as it still does for us, though perhaps a little less dramatically. These early devices, while functional, were likely not terribly precise by our modern standards. Their primary purpose might have been to divide the night into roughly equal watches for temple duties, or to ensure that certain offerings were made at approximately the correct nocturnal hour. Precision, in the grand scheme of the cosmos, was perhaps less important than consistency and the ability to measure something in the darkness. One interesting fringe tidbit about these early clepsydras is how integral they became to the spiritual life of the Egyptians. Time for them wasn't just a secular measurement, it was intimately connected with the divine order, with the cycles of creation and rebirth. The steady, relentless flow of water in the Clepsydra might have been seen as a microcosm of the eternal flow of the Nile, or even the passage of souls through the afterlife. It wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol, a miniature representation of cosmic harmony. You might say it was the original flow state before anyone knew what that meant. Historians still argue whether the invention of the water clock was a single, genius stroke by an unknown inventor, or if it evolved gradually from simpler observation methods. It's likely the latter, a testament to collective ingenuity over generations. The need was clear, the material was abundant, and the principles of hydraulics, even if not formally codified, were understood through observation. The Egyptians were, after all, masters of water management, constructing complex irrigation systems that fed their civilization. Applying that knowledge to timekeeping was a logical, if brilliant, leap. So, as we imagine these ancient timekeepers meticulously carving lines into clay or stone, filling and refilling their water vessels under the watchful gaze of the stars, we begin to appreciate the sheer determination involved in pinning down something as ethereal as time. They weren't just building clocks, they were building order, imposing human understanding on the vast, untamed expanse of existence. And for the sleepy traveler like yourself, it's a comforting thought, isn't it? Knowing that even in ancient times, people were finding ways to bring calm and predictability to their nights, one slow, steady drip at a time. As the sun dips below the dusty horizon, leaving behind a sky painted in hues of orange and purple, our ancient Egyptian timekeepers face their greatest challenge, the unyielding darkness. You see, the beautiful simplicity of the sundial, so effective during the day, becomes utterly useless as twilight descends. And it's precisely during these long, star-studded nights that precise timekeeping becomes not just convenient, but essential. Imagine trying to conduct a complex religious ceremony, perhaps involving intricate astronomical alignments, without knowing the exact moment to perform a specific rite. Or perhaps you're a temple guard, needing to coordinate watch changes in the deepest hours of the night. You can't very well ask your fellow guard to meet you when the moon is about halfway up. That's hardly precise enough for matters of divine importance or security. So, having recognized the sundial's profound limitation, the Egyptians turned with renewed focus to the Clepsydra. We've talked about the basic leaky pot principle and the inherent problem of diminishing flow rate. But the ancient Egyptians were not a people to be deterred by a bit of fluid dynamics. They were, after all, masters of moving water, from the vast irrigation canals that crisscrossed their land to the sophisticated systems that brought water into their cities. It was only natural that they would apply this practical knowledge to the problem of time. The leap from a simple leaky bowl to a more accurate clepsydra involved a subtle but crucial design alteration. The inflow clepsydra, or more commonly, refining the outflow vessel. Instead of just letting water drain from a single pot, they began to experiment with the shape of the vessel itself to achieve a more constant rate of flow. This was the true stroke of genius. Think of it not just as a pot, but as an intricately shaped container designed to counteract the decreasing pressure. Imagine a vessel that is wider at the top and gradually narrows towards the bottom, not in a simple cone, but with a specific, carefully calculated curve. As the water level drops, the cross-sectional area of the water at the top decreases. This decreasing area, combined with the smaller opening at the bottom, helps to maintain a more consistent hydrostatic pressure. At the outflow hole, it's a bit like designing a funnel so that the flow rate at the spout remains steady. regardless of how much liquid is left in the wider top part. This wasn't achieved through complex mathematical equations as we would use today, but through meticulous observation and empirical adjustments. They simply experimented until they found a shape that worked. The most famous and well-documented example of this advanced design is the Karnak water clock. Discovered in 1904 by the French Egyptologist Georges Legrand in the Temple of Amun-Re. At Karnak, this particular clepsydra dates back to the reign of Amenhotep III, around 1390–1352 BCE. You can picture it. A beautifully crafted alabaster vessel, shaped like a squat bowl or bucket, with a small hole near its base. It's not just a utilitarian object, it's a work of art, adorned with intricate carvings and hieroglyphs. This wasn't just something you'd find in any old kitchen. This was a high-status, temple-grade timekeeping device. The Karnak clepsydra is particularly significant because of its unique design and the detailed markings on its interior surface. This vessel was designed as an outflow clepsydra, meaning water slowly drained out of a small hole at the bottom. As the water level inside dropped, a series of marks on the inner wall indicated the passage of specific time intervals. But here's the truly clever part. These marks were not evenly spaced. Remember how the flow rate slows as the water level drops? To compensate for this, the designers of the Karnak clepsydra made the intervals between the marks progressively smaller as you move down the vessel. This meant that even though the water was flowing out more slowly towards the end, the time represented by the distance between the marks remained constant. It's a brilliant example of early non-linear calibration. It's like drawing lines on a ruler that get closer together as you go down, so that each inch still represents the same length, even if your pen is running out of ink. This meticulous calibration suggests a profound understanding of the physics involved, even if it was based purely on empirical observation rather than theoretical physics. They must have spent countless hours, probably days and weeks, repeatedly filling and draining the clock, marking the levels against a known standard, likely astronomical observations, to ensure accuracy. It was a painstaking process, requiring the patience of a saint and the steady hand of a master craftsman. You can almost hear the soft drip, drip, drip as they painstakingly made each mark, perhaps under the glow of a flickering oil lamp. The outside of the Karnak clepsydra is equally fascinating. It's decorated with depictions of constellations, various deities, and the 12 signs of the zodiac, or rather, their ancient Egyptian equivalents, which are fascinatingly different from what we typically think of. These carvings served not just as decoration, but reinforced the profound connection between time, astronomy, and the divine. This wasn't just a clock, it was a cosmic calendar, a sacred instrument. It reminds you that for the Egyptians, time wasn't just a numerical sequence, it was part of the grand interwoven tapestry of the universe, guided by gods and stars. One quirky tidbit about these devices. Some scholars believe that the priests might have used a small float or indicator inside the clepsydra to make it easier to read the water level in dim light. Imagine a tiny carved figure or a simple wooden bob floating on the surface of the water, slowly descending, pointing to the hour marks as it went. It would add a touch of visual drama to the otherwise imperceptible march of time, like a miniature silent puppet show of the passing hours. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The Karnak water clock is one of the earliest and most complete examples of an ancient Egyptian clepsydra discovered. Its existence confirms that the Egyptians possessed advanced skills in both craftsmanship and practical physics, long before the classical Greek and Roman periods often associated with such innovations. It wasn't just a theory, it was a functioning, beautiful artifact used for crucial timekeeping in one of the most important religious centers of ancient Egypt. Historians still argue whether the precise function of every carving on the Karnak clepsydra is fully understood. Some debate whether the zodiacal signs were purely decorative or if they had a practical application for astrological predictions tied to time. It's a fascinating puzzle, much like trying to figure out if your ancestors' strange garden ornaments had a deeper symbolic meaning or were just, well, strange garden ornaments. The development of such accurate water clocks allowed the Egyptians to divide both day and night into 12 hours each. Now, this is where it gets a little mind-bending for us. Unlike our fixed 60-minute hours, the length of an Egyptian hour varied depending on the season. Since the length of daylight and nighttime changes throughout the year, longer days in summer, shorter in winter, and vice versa for nights, their hours also stretched and shrunk accordingly. So, a daylight hour in summer would be longer than a daylight hour in winter, and a nighttime hour in winter would be longer than a nighttime hour in summer. Imagine the confusion. Meet me in 2 hours, someone might say in summer. And then, meet me in 2 hours in winter, and those two time spans would be vastly different. It's a testament to their practicality that they accepted this fluidity. They weren't striving for universally constant units of time, but for functional divisions within the cycle of each day and night. It was a pragmatic approach, perfectly suited to an agricultural society whose life was governed by the sun's journey and the Nile's flood. It's like having flexible work hours, but for the entire civilization. This seasonal variation in hour length meant that the markings on the inside of the Karnak Clepsydra and others like it had to be adjusted. This was achieved by having different sets of markings for different months or seasons. Some clepsydras had up to 12 columns of marks, one for each of the 12 months of the Egyptian calendar. So, when it was summer, the priests would read the time from one column of marks, and when it was winter, they would switch to another. This level of detail and foresight is truly impressive. It meant you didn't just fill the clock. You had to know which season it was to read it correctly. It adds a layer of manual complexity that makes our digital watches seem almost comically simple. The precision offered by these advanced clepsydras, especially the Karnak type, allowed for much more sophisticated time management than was possible with sundials alone. They enabled priests to conduct nocturnal rituals with greater accuracy, astronomers to track celestial movements more reliably, and perhaps even allowed ordinary people to plan their nighttime activities with more predictability. While sundials offered the broad strokes of daytime, the water clock provided the fine details of the night, bringing order to the darkness, silently marking the passage of time in a world vastly different from our own, yet bound by the same fundamental rhythms of light and shadow. As the gentle drip, drip, drip of the water clock filled the serene temple halls, the focus of the ancient Egyptians shifted from merely telling time to understanding its very essence. You see, with the advent of the refined clepsydra, like the Karnak example we just discussed, the challenge wasn't just about getting water to flow consistently, it was about accurately interpreting that flow. And central to that interpretation were the marks, the carefully etched lines on the inner surface of the vessel that translated the descending water level into discernible units of time. Imagine yourself standing there, perhaps in the cool, dimly lit interior of a temple, a gentle breeze wafting through the open doorways, carrying the scent of incense. Before you stands the clepsydra, filled to the brim with water. As the liquid slowly, imperceptibly, begins its descent through the small outflow hole, your gaze is fixed on the inside wall of the vessel. Here, you see a series of horizontal lines, seemingly simple, but imbued with centuries of observation and meticulous calibration. These markings, as we touched upon, were the heart of the clock's functionality. They weren't just decorative, they were the readouts, the ancient equivalent of the numbers on a digital display. But unlike our evenly spaced minutes and hours, these marks had to account for the peculiar physics of water pressure. As the water level dropped, the pressure pushing the water out of the hole decreased, causing the flow rate to slow down. To compensate for this, the intervals between the marks became progressively smaller as you moved down the vessel. So, the distance between the mark for, say, the first hour and the second hour would be greater than the distance between the 10th hour and the 11th hour. This non-linear scaling was a brilliant empirical solution to a complex hydraulic problem. It means that while the physical distance between the marks changed, the time represented by that distance remained constant. You're essentially stretching the ruler at the top and compressing it at the bottom to ensure each hour is truly an hour, despite the water's decreasing enthusiasm to leave the pot. It's a bit like making sure every slice of a cake is the same size, even if you have to adjust your knife angle slightly for each cut. The precision of these markings was absolutely crucial, especially for the temple priests who relied on the Clepsydra to schedule their elaborate rituals and ceremonies. These events often had to coincide with specific astronomical phenomena, or certain times of day or night. A miscalculation of even a half hour could throw off an entire sequence of offerings or prayers, potentially displeasing the gods. You can imagine the stress. Did we miss the exact moment for the purification ritual? Was the water clock off? Again? Now, a mainstream historical fact emerges here. The surviving Karnak Clepsydra features 12 distinct columns of dots or markings on its interior surface. Each column corresponds to a specific month of the ancient Egyptian calendar. This is where the true ingenuity of their design for adapting to seasonal changes becomes apparent. Remember how the length of an hour varied with the seasons? A daylight hour in summer was longer than a daylight hour in winter, and vice versa for nighttime hours. To accurately reflect these changing hour lengths, the priests simply switched to the appropriate column of marks for the current month. So, if it was, say, the month of Akhet, the flood season, roughly July-August, you'd read the time using the first column of marks. If it was Pere, the growing season, roughly November-December, you'd use a different column. Each column had its own unique spacing of marks, meticulously calibrated to that specific month's average day and night lengths. It's like having a dozen different watch faces for a single clock, each tailored to a different time of year. Talk about customizability. This system required a fairly sophisticated understanding of the sun's annual apparent movement and its effect on day length. They weren't just guessing. They were making precise astronomical observations throughout the year, tracking the solstices and equinoxes, and recording how the duration of daylight and darkness shifted. This data was then translated into the physical design of the Clepsydra's internal markings. It wasn't just about pouring water, it was about applied astronomy and patient empirical data collection. A quirky tidbit that adds to the mystique of these markings. Some theories suggest that the precise method of carving these marks involved a ritualistic aspect, perhaps even magical incantations to ensure the true flow of time. While modern historians tend to focus on the engineering, it's not hard to imagine that in a society deeply steeped in spirituality, even the act of calibrating a clock might have been accompanied by prayers or offerings to ensure cosmic harmony. You might say they were hoping for a little divine intervention to keep their time on track. Historians still argue whether the 12 columns always represented distinct months, or if some columns were averaged for periods when day length changes were less significant. The exact method of their original calibration and how precisely these monthly variations were accounted for remains a subject of ongoing scholarly debate. Were they truly precise to the minute by our standards, or were they aiming for a more general, functional accuracy that suited their needs? The answers are often elusive, shrouded in the sands of time. Beyond the Karnak Clepsydra, other types of water clocks likely existed. Some might have been simpler, less ornate versions for more common use, perhaps for overseers in large agricultural estates, or for scheduling shifts in mines. These would likely have had fewer or cruder markings, perhaps only for dividing the day into 4 or 6 main periods rather than 12 precise hours. The grandeur of the Karnak clock suggests it was a high-end, perhaps even royal or priestly instrument. The very act of reading these clocks would have required skill. In the dim light of a temple at night, you wouldn't have a brightly lit, digital display. Instead, you'd likely rely on a small oil lamp or torch, carefully peering into the alabaster vessel to discern the water level against the carved lines. Some scholars speculate about the use of floats with indicators, as mentioned before, making the reading easier. Imagine a tiny wooden scarab beetle, for instance, floating serenely on the water's surface, its little legs pointing to the hour. Mark as it slowly descends. It brings a charming, almost whimsical image to the stark functionality of timekeeping. The importance of these markings extends beyond mere timekeeping. They reflect the Egyptian worldview, where order, ma'at, was paramount. Every aspect of their lives, from the annual flooding of the Nile to the movements of the stars, was seen as part of a divine cosmic order. The water clock, with its precise and predictable flow, was a terrestrial manifestation of this order, a way to align human activities with the grand rhythms of the universe. It was a physical representation of their belief that even time itself was subject to a divine, predictable plan. You could say they were the original control freaks of cosmic alignment. The continuous flow of water, marking the passage of time, also had a symbolic resonance. Water was life. It was purification. It was the essence of the Nile. Its steady, unwavering descent in the Clepsydra could be seen as a metaphor for the relentless march of time, for life's journey, and for the inevitable cycle of rebirth. It wasn't just about knowing when. It was about understanding how time fit into the grand scheme of existence. So, as we contemplate these ancient markings, these silent scribes of time, we appreciate the ingenuity and the cultural significance embedded within them. They were more than just scales. They were the interface between human perception and the cosmic clockwork, allowing the Egyptians to navigate their days and nights with a precision that was truly revolutionary for their era. And in the quiet drip, 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 you can hear not just the passage of ancient hours, but the echo of a civilization deeply committed to understanding and ordering its world, one precisely calibrated drop at a time. As the meticulously calibrated marks on the Karnak Clepsydra quietly fulfilled their duty, mapping the ebb of water to the flow of time, the Egyptians turned their minds to an even more profound challenge: the capricious nature of the sun itself. You see, while the water clock elegantly solved the problem of nocturnal timekeeping, and even allowed for variable hours to suit the changing length of day and night, it was in the realm of seasonal adjustment that their ingenuity truly shone. Imagine a society where the sun's position in the sky dictated everything from agricultural cycles to religious festivals. It wasn't enough to just tell time at night. They needed a system that could adapt to the grand annual dance of light and shadow. So let's delve deeper into this fascinating aspect: seasonal adjustments. You might be wondering, why was this such a big deal? Well, picture yourself in ancient Egypt. Your life, your livelihood, your very existence revolves around the Nile and the sun. The annual inundation of the Nile, the planting season, the harvest, all are dictated by the sun's journey across the sky, which in turn determines the length of daylight hours. During the summer solstice, you have long drawn-out days. During the winter solstice, the days are noticeably shorter, and the nights stretch out into seemingly endless darkness. If your hour was always a fixed length, then dividing a short, winter day into 12 hours would mean each hour was considerably shorter than a summer hour. The Egyptians, being profoundly practical and observant, understood this intrinsic variability. They didn't cling to the abstract notion of a fixed length hour. Instead, they embraced the concept of temporal hours, where the duration of an hour literally changed with the seasons. A day hour was simply 1/12 of the period between sunrise and sunset, and a night hour was 1/12 of the period between sunset and sunrise. This meant that daylight hours would be longer in summer and shorter in winter, while nighttime hours would be shorter in summer and longer in winter. It's wonderfully intuitive when you think about it from their perspective, even if it sends shivers down the spine of anyone accustomed to Greenwich Mean Time. It's like having a rubber ruler for time, stretching and shrinking as the year progresses. This pragmatic approach necessitated a clever solution for their water clocks. As we briefly touched upon, the Karnak Clepsydra provides the clearest evidence of how they tackled this. Its interior surface, remember, was marked with 12 distinct columns of dots or lines. Each column corresponded to a specific month in the Egyptian civil calendar, a year of 365 days divided into 3 seasons of 4 months each, plus 5 epagomenal, or extra days at the end of the year. Think of it like this. When the priests needed to tell time, they didn't just glance at the water level. First, they determined which month it was. Then, they would read the water level against the specific column of marks designated for that month. Each column had its own unique spacing of marks, meticulously calculated to reflect the average length of the day or night hour for that particular month. So, for a summer month with long days, the day-hour marks would be spaced further apart than the day-hour marks for a winter month. It's like having a perfectly customized spreadsheet for every month, constantly adjusting to the climate. The astronomical knowledge required for this level of calibration was truly impressive. They needed to systematically observe the changing lengths of day and night throughout the entire year, probably for many years, to gather enough data to create these precise monthly scales. This wasn't a task for a single individual. It would have been a collective effort, passed down through generations of priests and scribes, perhaps even involving some sort of communal observation post. They were, in essence, running an ancient astronomical observatory, all for the sake of accurate timekeeping. A mainstream historical fact here is that this system of seasonal or temporal hours was adopted by various ancient civilizations after the Egyptians, including the Greeks and Romans, highlighting its practical utility despite its apparent complexity to our modern fixed-hour sensibilities. It wasn't until much later, with the advent of mechanical clocks in the Middle Ages, that the concept of a fixed-length hour, independent of the sun's position, began to gain widespread acceptance. One quirky tidbit about this seasonal adjustment: some scholars suggest that the 5 extra days at the end of the Egyptian year, known as the epigomenal days, which were not part of any month and were often associated with the birth of specific deities, might have required a special, perhaps even slightly less precise, set of markings on the Clepsydra. Or perhaps the clock was simply rested during these liminal days. Imagine a brief holiday for the water clock, a moment of respite before the New Year's cycles began again. Historians still argue whether the transition between monthly columns was smooth or if there were discrete jumps in calibration, and how this affected daily life. The reason for this painstaking seasonal adjustment underscores the centrality of time in ancient Egyptian society. It wasn't just for personal convenience. Accurate timekeeping was vital for religious rituals. Many ceremonies and temple services had to be performed at specific times of day or night, often linked to the movements of celestial bodies or the specific phase of the sun or moon. Missing these precise moments could be seen as an affront to the gods or a disruption of Ma'at, the cosmic order. Astronomical observations. The priests were also astronomers, tracking stars and planets to create calendars, predict celestial events, and understand the will of the gods. Precise time was indispensable for these observations, particularly at night when stars were used as nocturnal markers. Agricultural cycles. While the annual Nile flood was the primary driver, knowing the exact timing for planting and harvesting within those broader seasons could optimize yields, a matter of life and death for their agrarian society. Daily temple administration. Imagine a busy temple complex with dozens of priests, scribes, artisans, and servants. Managing shifts, distributing rations, and coordinating various tasks would have required a reliable timekeeping system, even if it meant adjusting for the seasons. It was the original flex time schedule, but on a grand societal scale. The elegance of the water clock, particularly its ability to function in the dark, truly set it apart from its solar counterpart. While the sundial reigned supreme during the day, becoming a symbol of the sun god Ra's journey across the sky, it literally faded into obscurity at night. The Clepsydra picked up where the sundial left off, becoming the silent, steady sentinel of the nocturnal hours. It allowed for continuous timekeeping, ensuring that the rhythms of life and worship flowed uninterrupted from dusk till dawn. You can almost feel the quiet reverence in the temple as the night deepened. The only sound, perhaps, the gentle drip, drip, drip of the water clock. In a world without artificial illumination beyond flickering lamps, The concept of measured time in the darkness must have felt profound, almost magical. It transformed the vast, formless expanse of night into something comprehensible, something manageable. It offered predictability in a world that could often feel unpredictable. So, while we marvel at the pyramids, the intricate hieroglyphs, and the mummified pharaohs, let us also spare a thought for the humble water clock and the genius of the ancient Egyptians who painstakingly calibrated its internal markings to account for the ever-changing dance of the sun and the seasons. It was a silent, unheralded masterpiece of applied astronomy and engineering, allowing a complex civilization to live in harmony with both the visible and invisible rhythms of their world. And for you, my sleepy listener, it's just another gentle reminder of the remarkable ingenuity hidden within the annals of boring history. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ethereal shadows across the ancient landscape of Egypt, the sundial, once the undisputed monarch of timekeeping, would quietly recede. Its purpose fulfilled for the day, it surrendered its dominion to the silent, ever-present Clepsydra. You see, while the diurnal hours were meticulously marked by the sun's journey, the vast, inky expanse of the Egyptian night presented a unique and persistent challenge. This is where the water clock truly came into its own, becoming the indispensable instrument for nocturnal timekeeping. Imagine the deep, hushed stillness of an Egyptian night. The air, still warm from the day's relentless sun, carries the faint scent of the Nile and distant cooking fires. Overhead, an impossibly clear sky unfurls, a canvas studded with countless, glittering stars. In this profound darkness, the rhythms of human activity, especially those tied to the temples and royal observatories, continued. Priests needed to perform specific rituals that were aligned with the movements of particular stars or constellations. Astronomers needed to track celestial bodies for calendrical purposes or to make astrological predictions. Even the simple logistics of managing a large temple complex, guard changes, preparations for morning ceremonies, the quiet work of scribes, required a reliable way to measure the passage of time without sunlight. This is the primary, undeniable advantage of the water clock, its independence from light. Unlike its solar counterpart, the Clepsydra worked equally well in the brightest noon and the darkest midnight. It wasn't bothered by clouds, dust storms, or the moon's phases. As long as there was water to fill it and a small hole for it to drain, it would quietly, relentlessly mark the hours. It was the original always-on device, quietly doing its job while the rest of the world slept or worshipped under the watchful eyes of the gods. Consider the life of a temple priest. His day might begin long before dawn, requiring precise timing for a pre-dawn offering. Without a water clock, he would have to rely on rough estimations based on star positions, which, while useful, lacked the minute-by-minute accuracy that ritual demanded. The Clepsydra provided that crucial precision, allowing rituals to be performed at the exact, cosmically ordained moment. You can almost hear the quiet satisfaction in his voice as he consults the dripping vessel. Ah, yes, precisely 3 hours until the rising of Sirius. Enough time for one more chant. The very design of the water clock, particularly the more advanced outflow versions, lent itself to this nocturnal function. The act of reading the marks in the dark would, of course, have been challenging. This is where the internal markings we discussed earlier become even more fascinating. While some scholars suggest the use of floats or indicators, it's also plausible that priests used small, controlled flame sources, perhaps a tiny oil lamp or a carefully shielded torch, to illuminate the interior just enough to read the water level. This would have been done with great care, perhaps through a small opening or viewing slit to avoid disrupting the sanctity of the temple atmosphere or risking accidental fires. A mainstream historical fact here is that the Egyptian night was divided into 12 night hours, just as the day was divided into 12 day hours. As we explored, these were temporal hours, meaning their length varied with the seasons. The water clock's ability to seamlessly transition from measuring daylight hours after the sundial became obsolete to nighttime hours while still accounting. For these seasonal variations underscores its superior functionality for continuous timekeeping. It allowed for a 24-hour cycle of managed time, even if those hours were constantly stretching and shrinking. It was, in effect, their first continuous time-tracking system, a concept that would seem alien without the water clock. The importance of the water clock for astronomy cannot be overstated. Egyptian priests were not just religious figures, they were also keen observers of the night sky. They used the positions of stars and constellations to determine the calendar, to predict the annual flooding of the Nile, which coincided with the heliacal rising of Sirius, and for various astrological purposes. To accurately track the slow, majestic procession of the heavens, they needed precise time intervals. A water clock, quietly counting away the hours of the night, provided the perfect instrument. They could record when a particular star crossed the meridian, or when a specific constellation appeared on the horizon, all against the steady measure of the Clepsydra's drip. It was like having a cosmic stopwatch, allowing them to pinpoint celestial events with a precision unimaginable just a few centuries earlier. Think about the long, tedious hours of observation required. A priest might spend an entire night, perhaps several nights in a row, charting the movements of the stars. The water clock would be his silent companion, ticking off the temporal hours, allowing him to annotate his observations with remarkable accuracy. This meticulous data collection was fundamental to their understanding of the cosmos and their ability to create such a remarkably stable and accurate calendar. One quirky tidbit about nocturnal timekeeping. Some researchers believe that the concept of watching the hours at night, aided by the Clepsydra, led to the development of the Egyptian decans. These were groups of stars that rose consecutively at intervals of roughly 10 night hours over a period of 10 days, forming a kind of stellar calendar. It's thought that the water clock provided the means to precisely observe these decanal risings, allowing them to mark the passage of time even more finely than just broad hours. It was like having a giant celestial clock, with the water clock as the minute hand. Historians still argue whether the decan system directly influenced or was merely aided by the use of clepsydras, but the symbiotic relationship between the two for nocturnal timekeeping is clear. The water clock also played a crucial role in the practical administration of temples and palaces. These were vast, complex institutions, bustling with activity even at night. Supplies needed to be moved, food prepared for the morning, sacred objects cleaned, and guards rotated. All of these tasks required coordination, and coordination requires time. Without the water clock, scheduling would have devolved into rough estimates, leading to inefficiencies and potential disruptions. It brought a quiet, predictable order to the nocturnal world, much like a well-oiled machine humming softly in the darkness. You can imagine a harried temple administrator, sighing in relief as he checks the Clepsydra, knowing exactly how much time he has before the morning offerings. The enduring legacy of the water clock for nighttime use is profound. It liberated timekeeping from the sun's tyranny, opening up the possibilities for continuous 24-hour monitoring. This fundamental shift allowed for advancements in astronomy, more precise religious practices, and ultimately, a more ordered and predictable society. It also laid the groundwork for future civilizations to develop ever more sophisticated methods of time measurement, always building upon the principle of a controlled flow to track the passage of moments. So, as you slowly succumb to the gentle rhythm of this story, consider the ancient Egyptian in the dead of night, perhaps a priest or an astronomer, his face illuminated by the soft glow of a lamp as he gazes into the alabaster bowl. The quiet drip, drip, drip is more than just water. It is the sound of time being measured, of order being imposed on chaos, of humanity reaching out to grasp the elusive moments that define existence. It is a testament to their quiet ingenuity, their profound connection to the cosmos, and their enduring quest to understand the very fabric of time itself. As the gentle drip, drip, drip of the Clepsydra marked the silent passage of the Egyptian night, the water clock wasn't just a utilitarian device. It was deeply intertwined with the very fabric of temple life. You see, for the ancient Egyptians, the temple wasn't merely a place of worship. It was the cosmic nexus, the dwelling place of the gods, and the epicenter of intellectual and administrative activity. And within these sacred precincts, time, measured with meticulous care by the water clock, dictated almost every rhythm and ritual. Imagine yourself as a visiting dignitary, or perhaps even a humble acolyte, entering the grand temple complex. The sea air is thick with the scent of burning incense and the quiet murmur of prayers. Sunlight streams through clerestory windows, illuminating intricate hieroglyphs on towering columns. As dusk falls, however, a different atmosphere descends. The vast halls become hushed, shadows deepen, and the soft glow of oil lamps casts dancing patterns on the walls. It is in this nocturnal setting that the water clock truly comes alive, becoming the silent conductor of divine harmony. The priests, the ultimate custodians of both spiritual and temporal order, relied heavily on the Clepsydra. Their entire day, and particularly their night, was structured around a precise schedule of offerings, prayers, purifications, and astronomical observations. Missing a crucial moment could be seen as an affront to the deities, potentially disrupting the delicate balance of Ma'at, the cosmic order that governed their universe. So, the water clock wasn't just a tool, it was a sacred instrument, ensuring that humanity's actions aligned perfectly with divine will. A mainstream historical fact here is that the daily temple rituals were incredibly complex and numerous, often requiring multiple stages of preparation and execution at specific intervals. For example, the daily offering ritual was a highly elaborate sequence of events performed multiple times a day, particularly at dawn, noon, and dusk, but also sometimes throughout the night. The water clock provided the precision needed to ensure that each phase of these rituals, from the purification of the priest to the presentation of offerings to the statue of the deity, occurred at the astrologically and ritually correct moment. Without such a device, chaos, or at least polite spiritual tardiness, would undoubtedly ensue. You can almost hear the head priest, glancing at the Clepsydra, murmuring, "Just 2 more drops until the hymn to Osiris is due." Consider the sheer logistics involved. A large temple like Karnak or Luxor would have employed hundreds, if not thousands, of priests, scribes, artisans, and support staff, managing their shifts, ensuring that the correct offerings were prepared and delivered on time, coordinating the various ceremonial processions. All of this required a reliable, consistent timekeeping system. The water clock, particularly during the long night hours when sundials were useless, provided this indispensable backbone of temple administration. It was their original shift scheduling software, powered by gravity and ingenuity. Beyond the daily rituals, the water clock was critical for specific religious festivals and astronomical events. Many major festivals in the Egyptian calendar were timed to coincide with celestial phenomena, such as the heliacal rising of Sirius, which heralded the annual Nile flood, or the solstices and equinoxes. Accurate timekeeping, enabled by the Clepsydra, allowed priests to predict and observe these moments with precision, ensuring that the associated festivals were celebrated at the peak of their cosmic significance. It tied their earthly existence directly to the grand rhythms of the universe. One quirky tidbit about the temple's reliance on water clocks. Some Egyptologists believe that certain temple layouts or specific architectural features, such as narrow shafts or viewing slits, might have been designed to facilitate the reading of these clocks, especially in very low light conditions. Imagine a priest positioned just so, a faint glow from a lamp illuminating the water level within the alabaster vessel. The only sound the rhythmic drip, 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 as he noted the passage of another hour for the sacred records. It adds a layer of purposeful design to the ancient structures, suggesting that their form often followed the function of cosmic observation and timekeeping. Historians still argue about the precise architectural accommodations made for time-telling devices within various temple complexes. Furthermore, the water clock was not just for priests. Scribes working in the temple libraries, meticulously copying ancient texts or recording historical events, would have relied on the Clepsydra to gauge their working hours. Artisans crafting intricate carvings or paintings within the temple walls might have used it to manage their time and ensure they met their deadlines. Even the preparation of the temple meals, ensuring offerings were fresh and ready, would have benefited from predictable time divisions. It was the original punch clock, but much more serene. The symbolism inherent in the water clock also resonated deeply within the temple context. Water itself was a potent symbol of life, purification, and the creative force of the Nile, a gift from the gods. The steady, unceasing flow of water within the Clepsydra mirrored the eternal flow of time, the cycles of creation and destruction, and the journey of the soul. It was a tangible representation of Ma'at, of cosmic order and balance, bringing a sense of divine predictability to the earthly realm. The constant rhythmic sound of dripping water might have even contributed to the meditative atmosphere of the temple, a gentle reminder of the ceaseless passage of existence. You can almost feel the quiet reverence, the deep sense of purpose that permeated these ancient institutions. Every action, every ritual, every prayer was imbued with meaning, and the water clock was there, a silent, unwavering witness, ensuring that all unfolded according to the divine plan. It wasn't about rushing or beating the clock. It was about aligning with its steady, unhurried pace, ensuring that human endeavors resonated with the timeless rhythms of the cosmos. So, as you slowly drift deeper into this tranquil narrative, imagine the Karnak Clepsydra not just as a piece of ancient technology, but as a living heart within the temple, its rhythmic beat setting the pulse for sacred ceremonies, scholarly pursuits, and the daily lives of those dedicated to serving the gods. It was a testament to the Egyptian genius for integrating practicality with profound spiritual belief, ensuring that even in the deepest night, time continued its majestic, measured dance. Beyond the sacred precincts of the temples, where the water clock orchestrated the intricate dance of religious rituals, the humble Clepsydra found its way into the broader tapestry of ancient Egyptian daily life. While perhaps not as ubiquitous as a sundial would have been during the day, its consistent presence began to weave a new thread of temporal awareness into the fabric of ordinary existence. You see, the need to measure time wasn't exclusive to priests or astronomers. As society grew more complex, so did the demands for scheduling and predictability for everyone. Imagine stepping out of the Grand Temple and into the bustling streets of an Egyptian city like Memphis or Thebes. The air is alive with the chatter of merchants, the cries of street vendors, and the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Life here, too, had its own rhythms, driven by trade, labor, and the simple necessities of existence. And while the sun still largely dictated the broad strokes of the day, the water clock offered a newfound precision, particularly when the sun wasn't available. Consider for a moment the bustling marketplaces. Merchants needed to know when to open and close their stalls, when to expect fresh deliveries of goods arriving by boat on the Nile, or when to meet a supplier for a transaction. While a sundial might tell them it was midday, a water clock could help them gauge how much time remained until the market closed, or how many hours until a specific trade caravan was expected to arrive. It brought a practical predictability to the chaotic ebb and flow of commerce. You can almost hear a merchant, haggling over a bundle of papyrus, glance at a small, perhaps less ornate water clock. No, my friend, the hour is growing late. I must close my shop soon. Then there were the various craftsmen and laborers. Imagine a stonemason working on a new statue for a nobleman, or a weaver meticulously crafting linen for royal garments. Their work often required sustained periods of concentration and effort, knowing how much time had passed and how much time remained before a break or the end of the workday would have been invaluable. While supervision might have been more direct, a shared understanding of time, perhaps through a centrally located water clock in a workshop, would have fostered greater efficiency. It was the original time clock for getting things done, but with a much gentler, dripping sound. A mainstream historical fact here is that while large, elaborate clepsydras, like the Karnak example, were likely reserved for temples and royalty, simpler, perhaps less accurate, versions of the water clock almost certainly found their way into the homes of the wealthy and into public spaces or administrative buildings, enabling a wider segment of the population to engage with measured time. This proliferation, even if limited, marked a significant step in democratizing timekeeping beyond purely religious or astronomical contexts. Consider also the legal and administrative systems. Ancient Egypt had complex laws and a highly structured bureaucracy. Legal proceedings might have required time limits for arguments, or certain administrative tasks might have needed to be completed within specific deadlines. A water clock, with its ability to measure consistent, even if seasonally adjusted, hours, would have provided an impartial and objective measure of elapsed time. It was the original timer for court cases, much fairer than relying on someone's subjective feeling of how long a monologue had lasted. One quirky tidbit relates to ancient Egyptian education. Scribes, the elite literate class, underwent rigorous training that involved copying texts for hours on end. It's plausible that water clocks were used in scribal schools to time lessons or writing exercises, ensuring students spent a sufficient, immeasurable amount of time on their studies. Imagine a young scribe diligently practicing his hieroglyphs, glancing at the dripping water, knowing he had to complete his assigned passage before the vessel emptied. It adds a certain methodical rhythm to ancient learning. Historians still argue about the precise extent of Clepsydra use in non-temple settings and how widely they were distributed among the populace, even in the more intimate settings of domestic life. A small water clock might have served a purpose for the affluent, while most ordinary households would have relied on the sun, the stars, and natural routines. A household with servants might have used a clepsydra to manage chores or to schedule activities, especially during the long Egyptian nights. When should the evening meal be prepared? When should the household retire? The quiet drip, drip, drip would provide a subtle, non-intrusive reminder of the passage of time. It was the original smart speaker, quietly offering time updates without any annoying ads. The very concept of a measurable hour, even a temporal one, would have slowly but surely permeated the collective consciousness. Before water clocks, time was probably perceived more organically as simply before noon, after sunset, or when the stars are high. The clepsydra introduced a more granular, countable unit, fostering a growing awareness of time as a divisible, manageable commodity. This shift in perception laid important groundwork for future advancements in timekeeping and societal organization. It's important to remember that while the water clock offered precision, it still required human interaction. Someone had to fill it, reset it, and read its markings. It wasn't a set-it-and-forget-it device like a modern clock. This constant interaction, this human connection to the flow of time, might have fostered a deeper appreciation for its relentless yet graceful passage. It was a tangible connection to Ma'at, the cosmic order, even in the mundane tasks of daily life. The diffusion of water clock technology, even to a limited extent, signifies a broader cultural embrace of measured time. It demonstrates that the ancient Egyptians were not just concerned with monumental, eternal structures, but also with the practicalities of living in a world that demanded increasing precision and organization. From the grand temple rituals to the bustling marketplace, the water clock, in its various forms, was quietly shaping how ancient Egyptians perceived and managed their most precious, non-renewable resource, time itself. And for you, my sleepy companion, it's a gentle reminder that even in ancient times, the quest for order and predictability permeated every aspect of existence, one quiet drip at a time. As the subtle influence of the water clock seeped from the grand temples into the daily routines of ancient Egypt, a quiet revolution in timekeeping was underway. The initial, somewhat crude leaky pots had evolved into remarkably sophisticated instruments, a testament to centuries of observation, experimentation, and refinement. You see, the Egyptians were not content to simply have a time-telling device. They were driven by a desire for accuracy, consistency, and a profound understanding of the principles that governed the flow of water itself. This quest for perfection led to a continuous process of design evolution and innovation. Imagine the early inventors, long before formalized scientific method, painstakingly adjusting the dimensions of their vessels. They would notice that a simple cylindrical pot produced an uneven flow, slowing down dramatically as the water level dropped. So, they would experiment. What if the pot was wider at the top and narrower at the bottom? This conical shape, as we discussed, was an intuitive first step, helping to maintain a more consistent pressure head as the volume of water decreased. It was like tweaking a garden hose nozzle until you got the perfect steady spray. But the conical shape wasn't perfect. While better than a cylinder, the flow rate would still diminish. This pushed them towards even more intricate internal designs. The truly advanced clepsydras, like the Karnak example, were not just simple cones, but had carefully calculated, curved internal profiles. The cross-sectional area of the water at different heights was precisely engineered to ensure that the volume of water flowing out per unit of time remained as constant as possible. This was essentially an early form of hydraulic engineering, where the shape of the container directly compensated for the changing pressure. It's a quiet marvel of ancient applied physics, a silent ballet of water and geometry. Think of the tools and materials involved in this precision crafting. These vessels were often made of alabaster, a soft, translucent form of gypsum, which was relatively easy to carve and polish. However, creating an interior with precise, non-linear curves would have required immense skill. Artisans would have used chisels, drills, and abrasive powders, meticulously removing material, constantly checking their progress against templates, or by repeatedly filling and draining the vessel. This wasn't a mass production effort. Each advanced clepsydra was a unique piece of engineering art, a slow, painstaking creation. You can almost feel the grit of the stone dust and the focused gaze of the craftsman, striving for perfection. A mainstream historical fact here is that the sophisticated design of later Egyptian water clocks, particularly their internal profiles, demonstrated an empirical understanding of hydrostatic pressure and fluid dynamics centuries before these principles were formally articulated by Greek and Roman natural philosophers. They knew how to make the water flow consistently, even if they couldn't write down the exact equations to explain why. This pragmatic knowledge, born from observation and repeated experimentation, was a hallmark of Egyptian ingenuity. One of the most significant innovations was the development of different types of clepsydras. While the outflow clepsydra, where water drains out of a calibrated vessel, was prominent, there's evidence and scholarly debate about inflow clepsydras as well. In an inflow clepsydra, water would drip at a constant rate into a receiving vessel, and the marks would be on the inside of that vessel, measuring the accumulated water. The challenge with this design shifted to ensuring a perfectly constant drip from the source, perhaps achieved with a very small, precisely manufactured opening from a larger, constant head reservoir. Historians still argue whether inflow clepsydras were widely adopted in ancient Egypt, or if they remained more theoretical concepts. Another quirky tidbit involves the material and decoration. While alabaster was common for temple clocks, simpler versions might have been made from more accessible materials like pottery or even wood. These less durable materials wouldn't have survived the millennia, which is why much of our evidence comes from the more robust stone examples. Imagine a basic wooden clepsydra in a bustling workshop, perhaps a bit crudely carved, but still doing its job, quietly helping a carpenter keep track of his working hours. These humbler versions, though lost to time, speak to the widespread applicability of the concept. The innovation wasn't just about the vessel itself. It also extended to the accessories and mechanisms that might have accompanied the clepsydra. While purely speculative, some theories suggest early forms of floats or pointers, possibly with elaborate designs that would descend with the water level, making the time easier to read from a distance or in dim light. Imagine a small, stylized bird or a miniature obelisk floating on the water's surface, its tip pointing to the current hour mark. This would add a visual, almost theatrical element to timekeeping, making it accessible even to those not directly peering into the vessel. The development of the seasonal scales within the Karnak Clepsydra was, in itself, a profound innovation. The idea of having 12 distinct columns of markings, each precisely calibrated for the changing length of temporal hours throughout the year, represents a remarkable understanding of calendrical astronomy. It wasn't enough to just make a clock. They had to make a clock that could adapt to the very breathing of the year, to the subtle shifts in the sun's journey across the sky. This level of foresight and planning for annual variations is something we often take for granted with our modern, automatically adjusting clocks. Consider the intellectual leap required. It meant systematic observation of sunrise and sunset times over a full annual cycle, recording those times, and then translating that data into the physical spacing of lines on a curved surface. This process would have involved meticulous data collection, perhaps spanning several years to average out anomalies, and a deep, intuitive grasp of geometry and proportion. It was a precursor to modern data analysis, but done with chisels and alabaster. The drive for innovation wasn't born out of mere intellectual curiosity. It was a response to very real, practical needs. As Egyptian society became more organized, with increasingly complex religious schedules, administrative duties, and public works projects, like building those colossal temples, the need for more accurate and reliable timekeeping became paramount. The water clock evolved in lockstep with these societal demands, adapting its design to meet new levels of precision and utility. So, when we look back at the humble water clock, it's not just a relic of the past, it's a testament to the continuous spirit of human ingenuity, to the relentless drive to improve, to understand, and to control the world around us. From a simple leaky pot to a marvel of calibrated alabaster with multiple seasonal scales, the journey of the Egyptian Clepsydra is a quiet saga of invention, slowly but surely bringing order to the fluid concept of time. And for you, my sleepy friend, it's just another tranquil reminder that even in ancient times, innovation flowed as steadily as the water in those remarkable clocks. As the ingenious designs of the Egyptian water clock reached their zenith, allowing for precise timekeeping even through the darkest nights and across the changing seasons, the technology didn't remain confined within the sun-baked lands along the Nile. Like the gentle ripples spreading outwards from a stone dropped into calm water, the concept of the Clepsydra began to spread, slowly but surely, to other ancient civilizations. This diffusion across cultures is a fascinating testament to the universal human need to measure and understand time, and the effectiveness of the Egyptian solution. Imagine a world before modern communication, before the internet, before even widely printed books. How did ideas travel? They traveled with merchants along ancient trade routes, with diplomats exchanging gifts and knowledge, with scholars seeking wisdom in foreign lands, and sometimes, less peacefully, with soldiers on campaign. And as people encountered the remarkable efficiency of the Egyptian water clock, they undoubtedly recognized its immense value. You can almost picture a curious Greek traveler visiting the grand temples of Egypt, noticing the silent, steady drip of the Clepsydra, and thinking, now, that's a clever device for keeping track of time when the sun's gone home. A mainstream historical fact here is that the Greeks were among the first to adopt and adapt the Clepsydra from the Egyptians. While the earliest Greek versions were likely quite rudimentary, mirroring the initial Egyptian designs, they quickly began to innovate upon the concept. The Greek term Clepsydra itself, meaning water thief, is what we largely use today, a direct linguistic echo of its origins. This isn't just about borrowing a tool, it's about incorporating a fundamental method of timekeeping into their own burgeoning philosophical and scientific traditions. The Greeks, with their keen interest in philosophy, mathematics, and mechanics, didn't just replicate the Egyptian Clepsydra. They sought to understand its underlying principles and improve its accuracy. While the Egyptians had mastered empirical calibration through trial and error, the Greeks began to approach the problem with a more theoretical lens, striving for mathematical precision. They started to design clepsydras that aimed for a more truly constant flow rate, even exploring mechanisms that would maintain a constant water level in a supply tank to ensure consistent pressure at the outflow. This was a significant step, moving from purely empirical observation to a more scientific understanding of fluid dynamics. It's like moving from knowing that a recipe works to understanding why each ingredient plays a specific role. Consider the role of the Clepsydra in Athenian courts. One quirky tidbit is that these water clocks were famously used to time speeches in legal proceedings. Imagine a bustling Athenian courtroom, crowded with citizens eager to hear arguments. To ensure fairness and prevent endless monologues, each speaker was allotted a specific amount of time, measured by a water clock. When the water level reached a certain mark, your time was up. This wasn't a gentle, sleep-inducing drip. It was a firm, public declaration of the passage of time, ensuring justice was meted out efficiently. It's like a judge using a giant hourglass, but with water instead of sand, and potentially less dramatic if someone spilled it. Historians still debate the exact rules for pausing or restarting these legal clepsydras during interruptions or objections. The Romans, in turn, inherited the clepsydra from the Greeks, further refining and integrating it into their vast empire. They also adopted the idea of using water clocks in various public and administrative capacities. Roman engineers, known for their mastery of hydraulics, think of their aqueducts, certainly had the technical prowess to construct highly accurate clepsydras. These might have been used in military camps to time watches, in public baths to regulate sessions, or in government offices to structure daily work. The diffusion wasn't just across cultures, but within them, adapting to various societal needs. The spread of the water clock wasn't limited to the Mediterranean world. While evidence is less abundant due to perishable materials, the principles of the clepsydra also found their way eastward into ancient India and China. These civilizations, with their own rich traditions of astronomy and engineering, independently developed or adapted water clock designs, often incorporating unique features and advancements. In China, for instance, water clocks evolved into incredibly complex and beautiful instruments. They moved beyond simple outflow or inflow mechanisms to incorporate elaborate gearing, floats connected to indicators, and even figures that would mark the hours by striking gongs or drums. The Chinese, known for their pioneering work in mechanics and automata, transformed the basic clepsydra into truly intricate astronomical clocks, sometimes integrated into grand towers. These were far removed from the humble Egyptian pottery, bowls. Yet they shared the same fundamental principle of using water to measure time. It's like going from a simple abacus to a supercomputer, but both still count. This cross-cultural exchange highlights a fascinating aspect of ancient technology. Ideas often found fertile ground in different societies, leading to independent innovation and unique adaptations. The Egyptians provided the foundational concept, but other cultures then built upon it, customizing it to their own needs, materials, and philosophical outlooks. The humble drip of water became a catalyst for mechanical and astronomical advancements across continents. The very portability of the clepsydra, at least smaller versions, likely aided its spread. A sundial requires a fixed location and an understanding of local latitude. A water clock, once calibrated, could theoretically be transported and used anywhere as long as a source of water was available. This made it far more versatile for travelers, merchants, and military campaigns, further accelerating its adoption beyond its point of origin. This journey of the water clock, from the banks of the Nile to the bustling marketplaces of Athens, the courts of Rome, and the grand observatories of China, is a quiet testament to the enduring power of a simple, effective idea. It shows how fundamental human needs drive technological innovation, and how those innovations, once proven, transcend geographical and cultural boundaries. The quiet drip, drip, drip that helped ancient Egyptians mark their temple rituals eventually resonated across the ancient world, laying the groundwork for how future generations would perceive and measure time. And for you, my sleepy companion, it's just another gentle reminder that even the most boring historical facts often hide a fascinating story of global connection and shared human ingenuity. As the water clock journeyed from the sun-drenched temples of Egypt across vast landscapes to inspire innovations in Greece, Rome, and the distant East, its fundamental principle continued to ripple through the centuries, subtly influencing the very concept of timekeeping itself. The legacy of the Clepsydra, though often overshadowed by the later advent of mechanical clocks, is profound, touching upon not just the practical measurement of time, but also its philosophical understanding. You see, the slow, steady drip of water provided a unique, continuous, and visible representation of time's passage, shaping how subsequent civilizations would perceive and quantify moments. Imagine the transition. For millennia, time was a fluid concept, tied to the sun's arc, the moon's phases, or the cycles of nature. The water clock, however, introduced the idea of regular, divisible units that were independent of celestial visibility. While the Egyptian hours were temporal and seasonally adjusted, they were still hours, distinct, measurable segments. This laid the cognitive groundwork for time as something that could be broken down, quantified, and even standardized. It moved time from being solely an observation of nature to a constructed, measurable entity. It was like moving from saying, dinner is when the sun hits the mountain, to dinner is in 2 hours. A mainstream historical fact here is that the principles developed for water clocks directly influenced the design of early mechanical clocks. While the mechanisms were entirely different, gears and weights replacing water flow, the concept of a regulated, continuous measurement of time and the division of the day into measurable units was firmly established by the Clepsydra. The idea of a train of events, where one action triggers the next in a predictable sequence, has echoes in the continuous drip of the water clock. The desire to achieve a constant rate of movement, which was the core challenge of the Clepsydra, became the core challenge of the escapement mechanism in mechanical clocks. It's a lineage you can trace, a direct technological ancestry. Think of the Romans, those masters of engineering and organization. While they used mechanical devices to run their complex world, the water clock, in its various forms, persisted alongside early mechanical clocks well into the medieval period. This was often because water clocks could be incredibly accurate for their time, especially large, well-maintained ones. They provided a reliable baseline, a sort of ancient atomic clock against which other, perhaps less reliable, early mechanical experiments could be checked. The philosophical impact is also noteworthy. The continuous, inexorable flow of water in a clepsydra became a powerful metaphor for the passage of time itself. It symbolized life's fleeting nature, the inevitability of change, and the relentless march towards an unknown future. Poets and philosophers, from the Stoics of Greece to later thinkers, would often refer to the flowing water of time, drawing directly from the visual and sensory experience of the water clock. You can almost hear a philosopher musing, like the water in the clepsydra, our moments drain away, never to return. It imbued the practical measurement of time with a deeper, existential meaning. One quirky tidbit: some very late and highly complex water clocks, particularly those developed in the Islamic Golden Age and in China, incorporated automata, moving figures that would mark the hours by striking bells or gongs, or performing intricate mechanical displays. These elaborate devices were far removed from the simple Egyptian bowls, yet they were direct descendants. They represent the fusion of the ancient principle of regulated water flow with burgeoning mechanical ingenuity. Imagine a magnificent brass peacock on a water clock, slowly turning and perhaps drinking water to mark the hour. A mesmerizing spectacle that would have drawn gasps of awe. This fusion shows how the core idea could be amplified into complex, beautiful, and even theatrical expressions of timekeeping. Historians still argue about the precise chronological influence of Chinese automata on later European mechanical clocks, and how much was independent invention versus indirect diffusion of ideas. The water clock's legacy is also evident in the development of more precise astronomical instruments. Accurate timekeeping was crucial for mapping stars, predicting planetary movements, and developing sophisticated calendars. The Clepsydra provided the foundational accuracy needed for these endeavors, allowing ancient astronomers to collect data with a level of precision that would have been impossible with sundials alone. The observational data, gathered using water clocks, fed directly into the mathematical models that later astronomers, like those in Ptolemaic Egypt and the Islamic world, would use to create their influential celestial tables. Even the very vocabulary of time can trace some subtle lineage back to the water clock. Concepts like flowing time, time running out, or time marching on are all deeply ingrained metaphors that resonate with the physical experience of watching a clepsydra. These aren't just abstract ideas, they are echoes of a tangible sensory interaction with one of the earliest forms of accurate time measurement. Furthermore, the water clock's challenge, achieving a truly constant flow rate, spurred ongoing innovation in fluid dynamics. The attempts to create perfectly shaped vessels, to maintain constant pressure, or to regulate the drip were early, albeit empirical, forays into understanding the behavior of liquids under gravity. This practical experimentation laid groundwork for later scientific inquiry into hydraulics and hydrostatics, disciplines that underpin much of modern engineering. The fact that the water clock remained a viable and often preferred method of timekeeping for thousands of years speaks volumes about its effectiveness. It wasn't immediately replaced by mechanical clocks. Rather, it coexisted and evolved alongside them for a considerable period. This enduring utility, from ancient Egyptian temples to medieval European monasteries, underscores its fundamental brilliance. So, as you slowly succumb to the gentle rhythm of this narrative, reflect on the quiet, enduring legacy of the water clock. It wasn't just a clever ancient gadget, it was a conceptual bridge connecting humanity's earliest, intuitive understanding of time to the precise, mechanized measurements we rely on today. It shaped our perception, influenced our language, and spurred countless innovations, all from the steady, unwavering drip, drip, drip of water. And for you, my sleepy friend, it's just another tranquil reminder that even the simplest ancient inventions can have a profoundly long reach into the future, quietly shaping the world we inhabit. As the gentle rhythm of the water clock continued its quiet influence through the ages, rippling outwards from its Egyptian origins and shaping the very concept of time, its journey finally brings us to a remarkable realization. The principles and the spirit of the ancient Clepsydra continue to echo in our modern world, often in ways we scarcely perceive. You see, while we are surrounded by atomic clocks, smartwatches, and ubiquitous digital displays, the fundamental human drive to measure and synchronize, first given reliable form by the water clock, remains just as potent. Imagine our world today. Every aspect of our lives is governed by precise time: train schedules, flight departures, stock market transactions, satellite navigation, even the precise timing of your morning coffee machine. This relentless precision feels entirely modern, a product of silicon chips and global networks. Yet, the deep-seated need for this precision and the conceptual framework for thinking about time as divisible and measurable owes a quiet debt to those ancient, dripping vessels. You can almost hear the soft drip, drip, drip beneath the whir of your laptop, a distant echo of ancient ingenuity. A mainstream historical fact here is that the standardization of the hour to a fixed 60-minute duration, a concept we take for granted, was a slow evolution that arguably began to gain significant traction only after the widespread adoption of mechanical clocks in the Middle Ages. Before then, the temporal hours of the water clock, which changed with the seasons, were the norm for millennia. But the idea of dividing the day and night into 12 distinct periods, regardless of their length, was firmly established by the Clepsydra. It provided the intellectual blueprint for a divided day, paving the way for the later, fixed hour system. It's like the water clock drew the first rough map, and later inventors filled in the precise coordinates. Think about the very concept of flow. We still speak of the flow of time, time flowing by, or going with the flow. These common idioms are not accidental. They are linguistic fossils, remnants of a time when the most accurate and widely understood representation of time's passage was the steady, continuous movement of water. The Clepsydra offered a visceral, tangible experience of time as a constant, irreversible stream, much like the Nile itself. This imagery is so deeply embedded in our collective consciousness that it permeates our language without us even realizing its ancient origins. One quirky tidbit. While mechanical clocks eventually replaced water clocks for most practical purposes, water still plays a fascinating, if niche, role in modern timekeeping. Consider the concept of hydro-powered clocks, or even some elaborate fountains that mark time in public spaces. These aren't clepsydras in the ancient sense, but they are modern homages, celebrating the elegance of water's flow as a means of marking time. Imagine a grand civic fountain in a European city, where jets of water rise and fall, or move in patterns to indicate the hour, a beautiful and artistic nod to the ancient technology. Historians still argue about the precise lineage of some of these aesthetic, water-based time-telling features in architecture, whether they are direct descendants or merely parallel developments. The scientific principles that the Egyptians intuitively grasped through empirical observation, hydrostatic pressure and fluid dynamics, are, of course, foundational to countless modern technologies. From plumbing and irrigation systems to complex industrial processes, and even the design of airplanes and ships, understanding how fluids behave is critical. The early trials and errors with water clocks, figuring out how to achieve a constant flow despite changing water levels, were, in their own way, nascent steps towards these advanced scientific fields. They were unknowingly conducting early experiments in fluid mechanics right there in the temple. Even in modern education, especially in physics and engineering, the simple water clock often serves as a foundational example when teaching concepts like flow rates, pressure, and calibration. It's a clear, intuitive illustration of how a physical process can be used to measure something abstract. So, the principles embodied in that ancient alabaster vessel continue to instruct new generations, linking us directly to the ingenious minds of ancient Egypt. It's like the oldest, most patient professor, still teaching after millennia. The pursuit of accuracy and precision, which drove the Egyptians to develop seasonally adjusted markings and carefully shaped vessels, is a relentless human endeavor that continues to define our technological progress. From clepsydras to pendulum, clocks to quartz crystals, and ultimately to atomic clocks. Each step has been about minimizing error and maximizing precision. The ancient water clock set humanity on that path, demonstrating that time could be measured with greater and greater fidelity. And let's not forget the psychological impact of timekeeping. For millennia, human life was governed by natural rhythms. Sunrise, sunset, hunger, tiredness. The introduction of external, measurable time, beginning reliably with the water clock, brought a new layer of organization and control. It allowed for appointments, schedules, and the coordination of large-scale activities. This shift from purely organic time to measured time profoundly reshaped human society, enabling the complex civilizations we see today. You can imagine the subtle shift in human behavior, less reliance on instinct, more on the ticking, or dripping, of the clock. In a curious way, the very gentleness of the water clock, its quiet drip, 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 might also echo in our modern quest for more calming and less intrusive technologies. Think of ASMR videos, ambient sounds for focus, or meditation apps. The water clock, with its steady, natural rhythm, might have been the original sleep aid of ancient times, providing a soothing, predictable background sound to the passage of hours. It was a pre-technological form of white noise, calming the mind as it quietly measured the night. So, as we bring our tranquil journey through the history of the water clock to a soft close, it's clear that this ancient invention is far more than a dusty artifact from a forgotten era. It is a testament to human ingenuity, a silent witness to the dawn of systematic timekeeping, and a profound influence on our modern perception of time itself. Its echoes reverberate in our language, our technology, and even our subconscious understanding of the universe. And for you, my sleepy friend, it's a gentle reminder that even the most seemingly antiquated technologies can leave an indelible mark on the relentless, beautiful flow of human history. As our quiet journey through the history of the water clock progresses, gently meandering from its ancient origins to its echoes in the modern world, we arrive at a particularly fascinating aspect: the subtle diffusion of this technology beyond the confines of the Egyptian empire. You see, while Egypt was undoubtedly a cradle of innovation for the Clepsydra, the ideas and the working mechanisms of these ingenious devices didn't remain isolated. Instead, they traveled, often carried by the currents of trade, scholarship, and conquest, slowly influencing cultures far and wide. Imagine the bustling ports of the ancient world: Alexandria, Tyre, Corinth. Ships laden with exotic goods from distant lands would dock, bringing not only silks, spices, and precious metals, but also something far more intangible: knowledge. A merchant, returning from a voyage to Egypt, might describe the wondrous water thief he witnessed in a temple, a device that measured time even in the deepest night. A scholar, eager to absorb the wisdom of the pharaohs, might study the intricacies of their timekeeping alongside their astronomy and medicine. These interactions, seemingly casual, were the slow, steady currents of technological transfer. A mainstream historical fact here is that ancient Greece was a major recipient of Egyptian knowledge, including the principles of the water clock. While the Egyptians developed the Clepsydra primarily through empirical observation and meticulous craftsmanship, the Greeks, with their burgeoning philosophical and mathematical traditions, approached the water clock with a more theoretical and analytical mindset. They were less interested in just making it work, and more interested in understanding why it worked. This intellectual curiosity led to further refinements. The Greeks, for instance, were particularly bothered by the non-constant flow rate of the simple outflow Clepsydra. While the Egyptians cleverly compensated with unevenly spaced marks, the Greeks sought to achieve a truly constant flow. This led them to experiment with devices that maintained a constant water level in a supply reservoir, thereby ensuring constant pressure at the outflow hole. This often involved a system where excess water would simply overflow from the reservoir, keeping the main body of water at a steady height, much like a modern toilet cistern. This might sound like a minor tweak, but it was a significant conceptual leap towards greater precision, moving from a good enough solution to a more scientifically elegant one. One quirky tidbit involves the use of water clocks in Greek legal settings. It's famously recorded that clepsydras were employed in Athenian law courts to time speeches given by advocates and litigants. This wasn't a gentle, sleep-inducing drip. It was a public, often dramatic measure of allotted time. A magistrate might declare, "The water runs for a third of the jar," and the speaker would have to conclude their argument before the water emptied. This ensured fairness and prevented endless, rambling orations. Imagine the pressure, knowing that every drop of water was counting down your opportunity to sway the jury. It was a literal ticking clock, but with water instead of springs, and probably less likely to be thrown across the room in frustration. Historians still argue about the precise mechanisms for pausing these judicial clepsydras during interruptions or objections. From Greece, the technology seamlessly flowed into the hands of the Romans. The vast Roman Empire, with its unparalleled engineering prowess, adopted the clepsydra and integrated it into its administrative and military structures. Roman aqueducts, a testament to their mastery of water management, provided the perfect infrastructure for larger, more sophisticated water clocks in public spaces. These could be found in forums, public baths, and military camps, providing a unified sense of time across their expansive territories. A Roman centurion, timing guard shifts on the far frontiers of the empire, would have used a water clock derived from principles first observed on the Nile. The diffusion wasn't limited to the Mediterranean world. While archaeological evidence is often scarce due to the perishable nature of many materials, the concepts of water-powered timekeeping also traveled eastward. Ancient India and China developed their own highly sophisticated versions of the clepsydra, often independently evolving the technology or adapting ideas that filtered through trade routes. In China, the water clock, or leaking pot as it was sometimes called, reached extraordinary levels of complexity and artistry. Early Chinese clepsydras, dating back to at least the Shang dynasty, around 1600–1046 BCE, were initially simple outflow vessels. However, over centuries, Chinese engineers and astronomers transformed them into multi-stage, intricate mechanisms. They developed inflow clepsydras with floating indicators, which were more resistant to the effects of dust and evaporation. They then integrated these water-driven mechanisms with complex gearing systems, leading to the creation of truly monumental astronomical clocks. The most famous example is the water-powered astronomical clock tower built by Su Song in Kaifeng in the 11th century CE. This incredible structure was not just a clock, it was an observatory, an armillary sphere, and a celestial globe, all powered by a constant flow of water and a sophisticated escapement mechanism. It featured automated figures that would emerge to announce the hours, striking drums and gongs. This was a direct descendant of the simple Egyptian clepsydra, but elevated to a breathtaking level of mechanical sophistication, combining the ancient principle of water flow with cutting-edge engineering. It's like the humble leaky bucket went to engineering school and became a rocket scientist. Historians still argue about the precise extent of direct technological transfer versus independent invention in the development of water clocks across these diverse cultures. While some fundamental concepts undoubtedly spread through trade and scholarship, many innovations appear to have been developed in parallel, driven by universal human needs and local ingenuity. It highlights how similar problems can often lead to convergent solutions in different parts of the world. The widespread adoption of water clocks across such diverse civilizations underscores a critical point: the need for precise, continuous timekeeping was a universal imperative as societies became more organized. Whether for religious observance, legal fairness, military coordination, or simply the rhythm of daily life, the clepsydra provided a reliable solution where the sun failed. It was the ubiquitous clock of the ancient world, enabling a level of temporal organization previously unimaginable. So, as we contemplate the quiet global journey of the water clock, we recognize it not just as an Egyptian invention, but as a shared heritage of human ingenuity. Its gentle drip, drip, drip once echoed in temple courtyards, Roman forums, and Chinese astronomical towers, silently connecting diverse cultures through the universal language of time. And for you, my sleepy listener, it's just another tranquil reminder that even the most seemingly localized ancient inventions can have a profoundly global and enduring impact, shaping the very way we perceive and manage our precious moments. As the water clock gently flowed through the centuries, quietly enabling the precise measurement of time across ancient civilizations, its ultimate legacy extends far beyond its direct use. You see, the principles, challenges, and solutions embodied in the humble clepsydra laid crucial groundwork for the development of virtually all subsequent timekeeping devices, leading eventually to the incredibly precise instruments we rely on today. It was the original stepping stone, a profound conceptual leap that paved the way for the mechanical marvels that followed. Imagine a world before any consistent, internal mechanism for measuring time. You relied on external phenomena: the sun, the stars, perhaps the burning rate of a candle. The water clock introduced the revolutionary idea of a controlled internal process that could reliably mark consistent units of time. This fundamental shift from external observation to internal mechanism is the direct intellectual ancestor of every clock you've ever encountered. It's like moving from measuring distance by counting paces to designing a precise measuring tape. A mainstream historical fact here is that the problems solved by water clocks, particularly the quest for a constant rate of flow, directly prefigured the challenges faced by inventors of mechanical clocks in achieving a constant rate of oscillation. The core issue for both was regularity. For the clepsydra, it was ensuring that each drip or each volume of water represented the same amount of time. For mechanical clocks, it became about ensuring that each swing of a pendulum or each vibration of a balance wheel was perfectly uniform. The quest for isochronism, or equal time intervals, was a shared inheritance from the water clock to the mechanical clock. Think about the sheer ingenuity required to overcome the inherent challenge of the water clock, the decreasing pressure as the water level dropped, the Egyptian solution of unevenly spaced marks, and the later Greek solution of constant level reservoirs were brilliant empirical and theoretical triumphs in fluid dynamics. These efforts to regulate a continuous physical process to measure time were proto-engineering, laying the intellectual groundwork for later mechanical regulation. The escapement mechanism in a mechanical clock, which periodically releases energy to maintain a constant swing of the pendulum, is, in a profound sense, the mechanical successor to the water clock's clever vessel shaping or reservoir systems. Both seek to create regularity out of a naturally varying force. One quirky tidbit: some of the more elaborate water clocks, particularly those developed in the Islamic Golden Age and in China, incorporated elements that were remarkably similar in concept to parts of later mechanical clocks. These included sophisticated gear trains powered by water wheels, floats connected to complex levers that activated indicators, and even rudimentary alarm mechanisms that would trip at certain times. While these weren't true mechanical clocks, with spring-driven escapements, they demonstrated the creative potential of using a regulated power source, water, to drive complex, time-indicating machinery. Imagine a water clock where a floating bob slowly rises, and at a certain point triggers a lever that causes a small figure to strike a bell. This is a direct ancestor of the chiming mechanical clock. Historians still argue about the precise channels of technological transfer between these highly advanced water clocks and the emergence of purely mechanical clocks in Europe. The very concept of automation in timekeeping also has deep roots in the Clepsydra, from simple floats that indicate the water level to the more complex automata of later water clocks. These devices were designed to autonomously display the passage of time without constant human intervention, beyond refilling. This push towards self-regulating and self-indicating timekeepers was a continuous thread that eventually led to the fully automatic clocks of the modern era. The water clock was the earliest reliable machine to automate time measurement. Furthermore, the Clepsydra's ability to measure time continuously, day and night, provided a critical conceptual shift from discrete, celestial markers to an unbroken flow. This continuity was a fundamental requirement for later developments, like the fixed 24-hour day and the concept of universal time. Without the water clock breaking the day into measurable segments regardless of sunlight, the leap to a standardized, continuous hour might have been much more difficult. It transformed time from a series of events into a measurable, unbroken continuum. The accuracy achieved by advanced clepsydras also spurred the demand for even greater precision. Once people experienced the benefits of knowing time with reasonable accuracy, they naturally desired even more. This relentless pursuit of ever greater precision in timekeeping is a driving force that continues to this day, pushing the boundaries from mechanical watches to atomic clocks that measure time with incredible fidelity. The ancient Egyptian priests, painstakingly calibrating their alabaster vessels, were, in a sense, the earliest pioneers in this enduring quest for temporal exactitude. The development of the water clock also contributed to the intellectual evolution of metrology, the science of measurement. It demonstrated that even abstract concepts like time could be consistently quantified. This fostered a broader understanding of the importance of standardized units and reliable measuring instruments, principles that are foundational to all scientific and technological progress. The Clepsydra wasn't just a clock, it was a lesson in the art and science of measurement itself. So as you slowly drift deeper into this tranquil narrative, consider the quiet but profound influence of the water clock on the subsequent history of timekeeping. It was more than just a quaint ancient gadget. It was a foundational innovation that shaped our very understanding of time, laid the intellectual and practical groundwork for mechanical clocks, and set humanity on a relentless quest for ever greater temporal precision. Its gentle drip, drip, drip reverberates through the ages, a silent testament to its enduring legacy. And for you, my sleepy listener, it's just another tranquil reminder that even the most boring historical facts often hide the seeds of monumental future developments. As our long, gentle journey through the history of the water clock nears its tranquil conclusion, we arrive at a fascinating point of reflection: how the ancient pursuit of timekeeping, born from necessity and embodied in the steady drip of the Clepsydra, continues to echo, both literally and conceptually, in our modern understanding and experience of time. You see, while the physical water clock may be a relic of a bygone era, its imprint on our psyche, our language, and even our technology is surprisingly pervasive. Imagine yourself waking up in Bobo Dioulasso, Burkina Faso, at this very moment. Your phone, or perhaps a digital alarm clock, is displaying the precise local time. You glance at it, perhaps noting the minutes and seconds ticking by. This instantaneous, universal access to synchronized time feels utterly natural, almost innate. Yet this seamless flow of measured moments is the culmination of millennia of human endeavor, a thread stretching all the way back to the quiet alabaster vessels of ancient Egypt. The confidence we place in our precise timekeeping devices, whether for coordinating a flight or simply scheduling a meeting, stems from this long, continuous evolution. A mainstream historical fact here is that the concept of standardized time zones and the need for global synchronization, while very modern inventions, are direct descendants of the ancient drive for consistent timekeeping. The water clock, by providing the first reliable means of measuring continuous time, day and night, across seasons, laid the earliest conceptual groundwork for a world where everyone could eventually be on the same time, even if that time was initially flexible. Without the ability to quantify time beyond the sun's immediate position, global coordination would be impossible. It's like the water clock invented the idea of a universal measuring tape, even if its first measurements were a little wiggly. Consider the very nature of digital display. Our digital clocks often show time as a sequence of numbers, discrete units ticking over. This digital, quantized view of time is a conceptual opposite to the continuous analog flow of water in a clepsydra. Yet both serve the same purpose: to make the abstract concept of time comprehensible and usable. The water clock, by literally showing time passing as a continuous physical process, offered a profound visual and auditory representation that our modern digital displays, despite their precision, can't quite replicate. There's a tangible quality to the drip, drip, drip that a flashing number lacks. One quirky tidbit. While not widely known, some modern art installations and public spaces occasionally feature conceptual water clocks as a nod to ancient timekeeping. These are not practical timekeepers, but artistic expressions that use the slow, visible flow of water to evoke a sense of calm, contemplation, and the relentless passage of time. Imagine a gallery space where water slowly fills a series of interconnected glass vessels, each reaching a certain level to mark the hour, offering a meditative experience of time's quiet march. It's a beautiful, sensory echo of the ancient device, reminding us of time's organic nature. Historians still argue about the precise aesthetic and philosophical motivations behind these modern homages. Are they simply celebrating ancient technology, or are they subtly critiquing the frantic pace of modern life? The enduring metaphorical power of water and time continues to resonate. We still speak of water under the bridge to describe irreversible past events, a steady stream of information, or the tide of history. These are not accidental phrases. They are deeply rooted in humanity's long observation of water's ceaseless flow, a visual analogue to time that was powerfully reinforced by the physical reality of the clepsydra. The ancient Egyptians, watching their water clocks, intuitively understood this profound connection, and it became embedded in our collective consciousness. Even in the realm of stress and relaxation, the water clock offers a fascinating parallel. In a world saturated with urgent notifications and incessant demands, the very idea of a slow-paced, gently humorous historical storytelling channel is a modern quest for calm. The steady, predictable rhythm of the water clock, its quiet persistence, would have provided a natural calming presence in ancient temples and homes. It was the original ambient sound machine, a soothing, rhythmic counterpoint to the anxieties of daily life. For those seeking to relax or fall asleep, the concept of a measured, unhurried flow of time, as represented by the Clepsydra, remains deeply appealing. It's like finding comfort in the predictable rhythm of ocean waves, but in a small alabaster pot. The constant pursuit of accuracy and reliability in timekeeping, which began with the meticulous calibration of those ancient vessels, remains a cornerstone of scientific and technological advancement. From the sundial's crude shadow to the water clock's regulated drip, to the precise swing of a pendulum, the oscillations of a quartz crystal, and finally to the unimaginable precision of atomic clocks, each step has been a relentless effort to minimize error and achieve greater fidelity in measuring the universe's fundamental rhythm. The water clock was a pivotal link in this chain of innovation, demonstrating that such precision was not only desirable but attainable. So, as we gently bring our journey to its final repose, remember the ancient Egyptian, perhaps in a temple, in Karnak, or a wealthy home along the Nile, watching the water slowly descend in the Clepsydra. The quiet drip, drip, drip was more than just a sound. It was the pulse of a civilization, the measure of their rituals, their work, and their very lives. It was their way of bringing order to the formless expanse of time, a constant, soothing reminder that even the most ethereal concept could be captured, understood, and utilized. The legacy of the water clock, though often unseen, flows through every moment we measure today. It's in our language, our technology, and our fundamental understanding of what time is. It reminds us that humanity's quest to master time is an ancient, beautiful journey, starting with the simple, ingenious act of letting water gently fall, drop by quiet drop. Word count 2100. Now, as the echoes of ancient ingenuity begin to soften, allow yourself to drift further. The quiet hum of existence, the gentle passage of each moment, feel it as a whisper, a continuation of that ancient peaceful flow. Let your thoughts unfurl like shadows lengthening at dusk, becoming softer, less defined. The deep, dark river of time flows on, carrying you gently, effortlessly. There is no urgency here, only the soft, rhythmic presence of timelessness. Breathe deeply, softly, letting go of any lingering thoughts, surrendering to the quiet. The ancient world has done its job. Its stories now merge into your dreams, a seamless blend of past and present, all flowing together into a peaceful oblivion.